Hello to everyone and welcome to this new lecture of State of AI. Today I have a new lecture about a kind of different topic from the one that we usually treat in this channel. Actually, I would say is a bit less technical, but maybe a bit more applicative. So the title of the lecture is AI Ethics, How to Make a Policy. So as the title suggests, today we'll try to delve into the intricate world of the relationship between AI, artificial intelligence, and ethics. Differently from what I've seen many times online, today we will try not only to deliver some basic theoretical knowledge, but we will try to go more in deep on the practical application of and the practical aspects of the ways in which we can build a policy, to make a policy. I think it's evident that today AI is pervasive and is in all the aspects of our life, from ChatGPT to the new computer vision tool that are used in mobile application. AI is the core of the technology of the 2023. Of course, as the technology progresses, we need new set of policies made by government and policymakers that is able to cope with this new development. So, of course, today we will start from a general understanding of what we mean for AI, and then we will go through the relationship with the AI and ethics, and what is the society's approach to tackle AI and AI ethics. To make this lecture, I invited onto my channel Sofia Quaglia, who is an expert in AI ethics. Actually, she's an AI specialist working for Indingo AI, a company based in Milan. At Indingo, she's leading and building a vibrant community of AI specialists, where she is responsible for spread-heading research and AI ethics and politics. She has an MPhil in ethics of AI at the University of Milan, and also she has studied in Netherlands and at University College of Dublin in Ireland. She's particularly specialized in generative AI technology and how this technology influences society and works. So I think I have presented in a really high level the thematic. So Sofia, thank you very much to accept my invitation.
Thank you. Thanks to you, and thank you for presenting me. So if it's okay, I'll start with the presentation right now.
Absolutely. I will not stop anymore unless for some question. I think you have definitely something more interesting to say than me. So please, when you want, start.
Yeah. So feel free to stop me for any questions. And the presentation, as it was said, is called AI Ethics, How to Make a Policy. I put this kind of weird image, which is AI generated. I thought it represented like good side of things and bad side of things. We will see what the sides are. Here I was going to present myself, but I think we can gladly skip it and let's go to the table of contents. So the way I organized this lecture is in 4 parts. The first part is an introduction, is very high level, and is not like specifically on artificial intelligence, is more on generative intelligence. And then we will see what is AI ethics and what are the challenges of AI ethics when it comes to artificial generation. And then the third part, which is, I think, the most complicated part, is the one where I'm going to try to explain how difficult it is to build a policy when it comes to artificial intelligence and what is the state of art of the policies that we have and the laws that we have. And then the fourth part is quite lighter, as in I kind of present like overall what happens in the world and how certain things that we're going to explain in the lecture actually affect the world and affect society. And I'm going to try to show how we can go from theory to practicality in a lot of these situations that will come about with explaining generative artificial intelligence.
Nice. Really glad to hear that. Also, I think that it's really interesting to notice that the title of the lecture is not AI and ethic, like it's usually addressed like that. Is AI and ethics. So I can imagine that there could be, I don't know, I can imagine there could be some multiple approaches that we can in relation to which type of ethics we want to consider.
There are multiple approaches, and ethics are, AI is in different parts of the globe, and so there are different kinds of approaches to AI depending on where we will see.
No spoiler, please.
I did put a map of the world, so we will see what will come.
Nice, perfect.
So let's start with AI. So I started from the concept of attention because, like, everything that brought to generative artificial intelligence comes from this concept, which is attention, which was introduced in a paper called Attention is All You Need. Attention is All You Need is a title of a research paper in the field of natural language processing. And it is the paper that introduced the model of transformer. The transformer model revolutionized the way of machine learning model and the way we process sentences as data text.
Yes.
And so we say that this model, the transformer model, relies on the mechanism called attention. So with attention, just think very easily that is the first time where the language that is represented can maintain its semantic meaning. It's the first time in history that we can do that. The key contribution of this paper that I just quoted are self-attention mechanism, positional encoding, multi-head attention, and stacking layers. We are just going to focus on the self-attention mechanism. And what is important that we remember is that this mechanism allows our tool, our algorithms, to give value only to the important parts of the sentence instead of like losing itself into details, let's say. And then fast forward, we arrive to BERT, which is an encoder that uses transformers, and it learns through, it learns through marked language modeling. So imagine like sentences where words are like labeled in a specific way, and so the model learns through that. And this is important because GPT-3, which is the basis of generative models, are transformers decoders, which learns through casual language modeling, where, we will see now what it does. So we said we arrive at GPT-3. We are now in 2020, and we have a model which is always in the category of supervised learning. And it works like a subclass of fill in the blanks. I'm sure that the people that are listening like already know more or less what I'm talking about, but just imagine like a sentence where we take away a random word and the model has to learn how to generate that word that was taken away. And the differences between the previous GPT models in comparison to the GPT 3.5 model is that the model is fine-tuned with reinforcement learning. And so to all these fill in the gaps method, we just add a layer, which is called fine-tuning. And we reinforced with a loop of human feedback certain, let's call it direction, certain reinforcement in order to have a model that works better. And then we arrive to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is important not because is any better than GPT 3.5, but because it was the model that was open to the public population. And this is huge in AI ethics and in policy making, because if before we have these very powerful models that are used by people that know how to use them.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Now we have a model where, well, they ask you if you are of age, but you can also lie, like we all do. Online we can use it, right? So ChatGPT works on the same exact model as GPT 3.5, but it has another layer of security, which is the layer that OpenAI added in order to avoid the model's exposure to risky topics. So we like to say, in my company, we like to say that ChatGPT is very a democristian model.
It doesn't like extremism.
Yeah, it doesn't like extremism, and it doesn't like to take positions.
Yeah.
But you can already see here how ethics are kind of involved. Like you can see the fine balance that there is between opening a model to the general population and having to add that security layer, which makes the model less performative, but allows the model to be used by everybody and allows the model to kind of comply, even if we did see that sometimes it didn't comply, but overall comply to general rules of society.
Yeah.
Here I just put two slides where I wanted to show the different layers of the GPT models, but I think we can go through them quite fast.
Yeah.
The first one is the base, where there's the large language model generating text with word, like one word after the other. Then we have Instruct GPT, where it follows instruction. And then ChatGPT, which is working exactly as I just said. And then this year we saw that GPT-4, which is a new model, came out.
Yeah.
I don't want to explain GPT-4 because it's exactly like GPT 3.5. It's just bigger and it respects scaling laws. And with the scaling laws, we saw some things happening, like emerging abilities, for example. And this brings us into our new chapter, which is AI ethics. And keep in mind the emerging abilities. We are going to talk about it in a few slides. But just think that we are talking about models as big as GPT-4. And this is very important when it comes to ethics, because the size of the model and everything that comes with the laws of scale is important. So to kind of summarize the spectrum of AI ethics at the present times, I decided to show the two extreme points of AI ethics and the perception that there is around AI. In this slide, you can see that I'm talking about narrow AI and AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, or it's called singularity or superintelligence. In the first case, we have an AI that is very, very good and is outperforming a task that could be done by a human, but maybe the human is not that good at doing it, and the AI outperforms it. So the AI is designed to perform this function and just be very, very good at it. And nowadays, I think one of the most important narrow AI that we can think of is like facial recognition or speech recognition. All these tools that we see in our lives, like they are used in our life with a very high frequency, even if we don't know it. Yeah. And then there's AGI. AGI got quite famous, especially in the last year. It was also famous before with like people like Nick Bostrom that published like Superintelligence, and there's many famous people in the AI field that believe in superintelligence and believe that singularity is going to come and take us all. What is important for our lecture to know is that AGI is when a model, when an artificial intelligence becomes good at different tasks, and eventually it could become better than humans, and it could not be kept under the control of human beings. And this is important, and I wanted to talk about this very briefly because it defines the split in AI ethics.
Yeah.
We have a part of ethicists that believe that we need to fix the current problems that arise from the AI that has been in use. So think anything like bias, privacy, and the reaction to this is lawmaking, such as the GDPR, which is a set of rules that we have in Europe, and we have to comply those rules, and they kind of guide our lives in Europe. And then on the other side, on the side of artificial general intelligence, we have the problem of addressing a potential world drifting scenarios, like AI I'm gonna close my email, and I think you can cut this. So yeah, on the other side, we have the problem of having to address a potential world-altering scenario, like AI taking the world. And the reaction is like the letter to stop AI experiment for 6 months, where the reaction is like, oh, we can't do anything about this, so we have to stop everything. And kind of in the middle, I put the AI Act, because this is a new policy which will become a law, is done by the European Union, and we will talk more about this. But it kind of keeps together these two instances. So we have lots of norms in the AI Act. We have lots of norms that address privacy, address narrow AI, but also norms that kind of prevent AI experiments that might lead to very big consequences.
Okay.
And in this slide, in the next slide, I put this very nice map. So the map is actually a map that represents where AI research being done. But what I want to talk about is, like, it works, because I want to talk about how AI ethics is approached in different parts of the world, and it kind of follows the same location as where research is done. So you can see that there's mainly the highlighted countries are the US, Europe, and China. And you can imagine that all these AI tools kind of fit in different lifestyle, different governments, and different balances in lawmaking and in policy making. And this obviously impacts ethics. We can take the example of how data is used and processed in these three parts of the world, and how this affects the power that the countries have. We have the United States, where there's no regulation, and companies can take all the data that they want. And this kind of environment created a very big niche where research got huge. And we have places like OpenAI, Meta, and Google, and they can use all the data to produce these very big tools. And I say big because they are trained with massive amount of data.
Sure.
In Europe, we picked the kind of safe approach, where we have laws like the GDPR, and now we will have the AI Act. And so all the companies and the research hubs have to comply to such rules, which obviously touches also how do we gather data, what kind of data we use, how the data are manipulated during the experiment, third-party data, blah, blah, blah. And this affects the results that we have, because if we don't have the data to train...
Absolutely. There's no point in being AI. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we have the East. And I think this is a very interesting case, because in China, and I don't know if you have heard the kind of power struggle that we saw in the past few months between the US and China.
Yeah.
The US is trying to slow down the Chinese research. But China is super interesting because in China, they have a huge amount of data because citizens don't have access to privacy, right? But this data can't be used by the companies that work with AI because the data is property of
the government.
Exactly. So in this case, we have a research asset that is kind of lower compared to the European and the US one, but potentially it could be way bigger because the amount of data that they have is quite more detailed and quite bigger. Also because in China there's a lot of people, like demographics are very high. And so now we arrive to the more like theory part, but I'm going to be very brief and I'll try not to be boring. I put here the different aspects of AI ethics and the concepts that AI ethics tries to make sense of. You can read them by yourself, but they're very famous: privacy, bias, transparency, accountability, human control, all of this stuff. Now, I think there's a lot of talk about AI ethics, and these concepts got very trendy because companies have to talk about this in order to sound like compliant. And working with these concepts is very hard because you have to combine a lot of power instances and a lot of different layers of society, like the governmental side, but then also the private sector, which brings economy, and then the citizens part. And here I tried to show how the generative AI, which we just explained in the first part, kind of impacted the AI ethics debate. Because if before the problem was, algorithmic fairness and data regulation and making citizens aware of how their data we're going to use, now we have models like GPT-4, for example, that are big, models that we don't really know, and models that presented so far two instances that are quite worrying. One is the instance of emergent abilities, and the other is the one of hallucination. And then we have a third aspect, which is the aspect that I call open and closed source. This is a more political aspect, but most part of the companies that provide these tools that produce AI are private, and they are not required to share the research, and they are not required to share the data that they use. They're not required to share the data points. And
of course, I would say, because otherwise there would be no IP. I mean, I talk about a company that do, produce AI, and not only, but, we can't share waste or the research. Otherwise, it would be a complete violation of the IP. In any case, I understand the point that.
Of course, I obviously understand the company aspect, but I just like to mention it because I do think that it's a political problem. Because the results of what companies do affects the general population.
Absolutely.
So I'll try to go through those quite quickly. An emergent abilities, for those who don't know, is an emergent skill that it is not present in smaller models, but it appears in larger models. And it was quite surprising in the AI field when this came about. And the problem that comes with emergent abilities is that because we do not know what abilities will emerge, there could be some more dangerous ability that comes about. And this was, here I put a screenshot of the white paper that OpenAI published with GPT-4, where they talk about some experiment that they did with GPT-4, where they connect GPT-4 to a console and they want to observe how GPT-4 interacts freely with the console. And the experiment would allow us to know if GPT-4 decides to do certain actions like, I don't know, not do anything, or turning off the console, for example.
Sure.
And we don't know the results of this experiment. But yeah, this is just an example. I'm sure I could have found many others, but this was quite striking when they published, when OpenAI published the white papers. Some benchmark of emerging skills, we can see, I put them here. They are very famous at the moment. And as we said, they emerge spontaneously from the model. And my favorite one is the ability of following instructions, because this, in the AI world, opened an entire branch of research, which is chain of thought and prompting. So we got very, very aware of how important it is to use prompts.
Yeah.
And we got quite skilled at using this chain of thought, which is just providing the model with a list of instruction and kind of dividing the instruction into subset of tasks.
Okay.
For the model to understand it.
Sorry, if I can ask, if you go to slide before,
yeah,
please. Can you define a bit better what do you mean for instruction following specifically in this case?
So, I don't know if you, for example, played with ChatGPT. I'm sure you did. Everybody did. So perhaps if you were giving the model a more complex tool, a more complex task, the model was completely bypassing certain parts of the task and providing you with a result that wasn't what you asked.
Sure.
And this is because how you prompt for the model is very important.
Absolutely.
And then when I don't want to say we found out because it was always there, but like when we researched more about prompts, we got closer to this concept of chain of thought, which is that you provide, like, chain of thought is what we do as well. Like our brain uses chain of thoughts as well. So how a thought follows another thought.
Yeah.
If you makes that explicit to the machine, the machine will understand the task better. This is how the process works. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this chain of thought and prompting is because I using these prompting tricks, these techniques, to get the output that we wanted with a higher frequency, like to make the model more performative.
Yeah.
We, like in research, we got close to the concept of agentivity.
Okay, that is interesting.
For the agents. Just at a very high level, just imagine that the large language model deals with calls and answers. It had a central brain, and the central brain delegates the tasks to different agents. This is kind of like the idea. And this got super big in the field of AI ethics because it opened all sorts of questions for agentivity, free will, consciousness, and everything, like all the big questions that fall in the realm of artificial general intelligence, which we explained before. And it also helped to overcome some limitation of the large language models. Here, I put this big question, which I kind of spoiled 1 second ago, which is if agents could have free wills and emergent abilities. I don't know what you think about this.
Yeah, so I did some research on that. I mean, this is not particularly my area of expertise, but I do some personal research on that. I know that there is some theory, some model that explain consciousness as emerging abilities or an emerging epiphenomenon from neuron. Basically, in this case, would be instead of physical neuron, would be artificial neuron, like the one of ChatGPT. So, in my opinion, I'm not on that area of the the site. I think honestly, problem of consciousness cannot just be explained as an epiphenomenon of modules. I think I'm more on some other theories that explain consciousness, of course, as that make these modules as a necessary but not sufficient for images of consciousness. And so probably there could be something related to the physicality of the systems, so like for example quantum fields or stuff like that. So I'm more on that path, but this will be another discussion.
Another lecture. But it is a super interesting topic, and I am not going to dive into that. Don't worry. I didn't write the word consciousness once in this presentation.
Absolutely.
We are all good. But I just put this example, which is AutoGPT, because this is an experiment that got very, very big, and that was used as a proof of a potential free will for agents. Anyway, going on from the topic of emergent abilities, hallucination, I think these got super famous, so I just have one slide on this. Here I put two examples of how ChatGPT hallucinates on very, very easy questions. One question is, who was the CEO of Twitter? And you can read yourself, that is wrong. And the other one is multiplication. And the number is, it looks like it's in the order of greatness of the right number, but the digits are wrong. So these are two examples of hallucinations. Well, hallucination means that the model generates facts that are incorrect or nonsensical, but very often they look real because the model wants to represent them as real.
I think that the two examples that you have, I think the most interesting part of these two examples is the fact that actually the question in which where this hallucination happened more frequently, I don't have a statistical evidence about that, but what it seems, I mean, is the situation in which this happened is usually those questions, those tasks that are supposed to be, done better by a machine. Who is the CEO of Twitter? It should be, solvable at the end of the day, just by a kind of big, is a research task. You have a table where you say this is the name of Twitter, like basically Google does, no? So Google, is just searching in a big amount of tables, and the multiplication is basically, I think the first machines where the calculator is the basic computer, and actually ChatGPT is failing in what a normal calculator.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this was the biggest surprise with the generative models, because I think in the predictions that we were making, we always imagine a AI that was going to be like a better brain than us. And then we found out that generative AI is just more creative than us. Or I don't know if that's, now there's probably a lot of people that want to kill me because I said this, but
yeah, sure.
Like just AI, we would have never expected AI to be good at creating.
Absolutely.
Stuff. And on hallucination, I think now is going to be very interesting to see with DALL-E 3, because they said that is able to spell, and they fixed the problem of the fingers. And these were two very typical hallucination of generative models for images. So we will see. And then the last point of this part was open and close. This, I don't want to be too pedantic, and I don't want to take political sides. Yeah. I just want to present the problem as it is. So we have access to reports like the white papers of OpenAI or tech reports, but in such reports, very often there's not details that are useful to know to measure the impact of the AI tool that is going to be analyzed. We don't know the size of the network, we don't know data points, we don't know what kind of training. And this is very important because it has to do with power and with democracy, and whether the power for artificial intelligence is centralized or democratized. Here I put very briefly information that OpenAI released with GPT-4. I'm using OpenAI as an example, but just because they are very easy to make examples on. But this is obviously a topic that I could bring on for many other companies. They opened these 3 pieces of information to the public, which basically saying that GPT-4 was more accurate, less hallucination, and it was just better. But we do not have any metrics to verify this, and this is the problem for the reason that I said before. And just think it in a way that if the model has emergent abilities, and if the model is full of sites that we do not know, probably there's going to be problems that will come with that. And in AI ethics, as ethicists, we should have the ability, ideally, to prevent things instead of just reacting to things, right? And so the open and closeness of a model is very important. Here, I built this map of generative AI and its application. This is just, I don't know, for a screenshot and for knowledge.
I love these maps.
You love it?
Yes.
Very. You can see all the fields where generative AI kind of broke through. And we mainly talked so far about the dialogue part, and I made some example from the images part with Midjourney and DALL-E, and then GPT-4 for the dialogue part. And now, the policy making part of the lecture.
The practical part, more practical part now.
Yes. You will see that this part is less linear because making policies is quite complicated. I called it governance of, with, and by AI, a European perspective. I'll focus only on Europe in this part of the lecture. And so perhaps to start and to better understand the AI policy scenarios in Europe, we should start from the future, because at the end of the day, all regulation try to keep that in mind. Here in this graph, you can see the ideas of the European Union to shape digital Europe up until 2040.
Sure.
And I think in order to describe the debate at present of surrounding AI regulation, we need to recall in mind that split of AI ethics that I talked about before. So those people who want to solve the problems that are in the world now, and people that believe that singularity is going to arrive and we need to prevent singularity. And this is important because you will see how it reflects in policy making.
Absolutely.
I think you will see that it's very interesting in the reactions that also can be observed around the world.
Sure.
I'll talk about this later on. So, when it comes to Europe, we always have to think that in Europe, the technical side of things always have social political effects, because in Europe, companies do not have more power than citizens, right? So policy making will always have in mind countries and citizens, and the companies do not have a say in Europe, which is very different from our friends in the US. What we are observing is that the policy debate on the impact of technology on society is increasing. We are observing a rise in the power of tech giants. We are observing an emerging interest in regulating the digital sphere and in the algorithmic governance in the global landscape. So there are two main dimensions of concerns that the European Union keeps in mind, which is the role of the state in comparison to the market. So will the market govern, or will the state, as in Europe, govern?
Old question, I would say, no?
Yes. And then there's the individual part, which is the protection of the citizen, their data, their governance of themselves, etc. This is what we are seeing in a European perspective, and you have to imagine it as a constant battle. Because in Europe, both of these sides are important and have to be kept in mind. In this slide, you can see a beautiful Cartesian graph where there is the representation of four possible outcomes based on how we do policy making and what direction we are taking in the policy making world. I really like this Cartesian graph, and it comes from a report that was published by the European Commission. And so they use this graph, and you can see there's two main dimensions of impact. One is the dimension of digital transformation and its landscape. And so whether we will go into a more regulated interventionist approach, this is, if we bring it to the present, this is the direction where we have the AI Act, and which is now voted and then it will be put into action. And on the other hand, there is the more laissez-faire, I don't know French, but laissez-faire kind of approach, where we, that in the graph is called unregulated, where simply there's no regulation and the market will govern. And this is the approach that we can see in the US. On the other axis, there is the part for citizen, what is called digital citizen.
So in the horizontal axis.
Yes. And this aims to explain what is the role of the citizens in those two scenarios, whether we will have just a passive approach, which is in many respects what we have today, where citizens don't really know what is going on, don't really know what is happening with their data, don't really understand the AI tools that they use, or a more active approach where citizens are the real owner of their data. And this is the direction that we take with the GDPR regulation, for example. And just let me add that with this also comes a lot of education and a lot of advocacy in order to explain this word, which is a complicated word and is not a word that citizens will understand just by reading the newspaper.
Sophia, correct me if I'm wrong. If I look at this picture, I can't notice a kind of inner bias of the person that this picture, in the sense that correct me if I'm wrong, but what is seen as more positive, I would say, in the right, and the left a bit less positive, I would say, the more negative part. So the angel and the devil, I would say, even the color that helped me see this interpretation. But yeah, I think it is clear that the person that does these images want to to convey a message.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you're right. And it's the European Union's fault because I didn't make this graph.
Yeah.
But I think, we can also say that the biases that we see in AI are not made by AI, but they are made by us.
Exactly.
So this was made by humans, and they certainly picked colors and sides to be impactful and to play with our unconscious parts.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, here I put a list of values that are very important for AI governance in the European Union. I'm not going to read them all because I think it would be boring for use. But just know that they go from respect of fundamental rights and democratic values to human-centric system and sustainable digital society. And to kind of show where we are now, starting from these values, I put this beautiful picture of the vote for the AI Act. That was, this is June 14th, 2023. The AI Act is a really important act because it's the first act on AI governance, and it's the first in the world, and it's the first that will become a law. because everything else before was just guidelines, which do not really have any power.
Just a question on that, sorry. Are you sure that, because as far as I remember, the UK has a kind of AI Act before European Union, so maybe I'm wrong, but yeah.
It's true.
Okay.
It's true. I did say I was going to talk about the European Union.
Okay, perfect.
The UK, but yes, the UK is actually very forward with data governance and AI regulation, and yeah, it was prior to this, but and I think they overlap. So I think we can talk about the AI Act, but just you can go and read the UK one.
Sure.
It's quite similar. But anyway, I wanted to focus on three main topics for the AI Act, because we will see how they impacted our society this year. The first topic is about the prohibition on biometric surveillance, which, for example, touches facial recognition. And then there is the imposition of regimes on models such as the GPT models, and the right for people to complain about AI systems, so to give power to citizens to be part of the kind of talk that we are having about AI. And the AI Act obviously opens some opportunities like fundamental rights protection, involvement of citizens, and setting standards that are shared amongst all the companies, but also limitations, which is it adds responsibilities on businesses and the potential withdrawal of products from the market, because if products are not compliant.
Yeah.
And now, keeping this in mind, my favorite part of the presentation, because it's the easiest one, is where we see how all these complicated balances in policy making and AI ethics actually touch society and have an impact on society.
Perfect.
So the first example that I'm bringing it comes from Italy, where we are from, and is when our Garante of the privacy decided to block OpenAI's services in Italy, because the way OpenAI manipulated data didn't comply with GDPR regulation.
Sure.
So we have Italy, which is complying with GDPR regulation, OpenAI, which is in America and is not compliant. And this was a really interesting case, because in order for OpenAI to enable Italy to use their services, they had to open APIs with Azure services in Europe. And this is a perfect example of how AI ethics and having to comply to regulation impacts real companies and real movements in the world. Another example that I wanted to bring is a case on authorship and watermarking. So author rights for author, because by law the generations are not protected by copyright. This is because copyright is very closely linked to humans' authorship. And this also goes the other way around with the problem of plagiarism. But I don't know, maybe if you want to talk about it, we can.
I think it's really interesting, because I think there is actually now, or it was last week, a strike I think in Hollywood, no? About the film directors and
screenplayers and this is huge. The fact that a lot of tasks that were only provided by human beings before are now easily accessed and provided by tools like ChatGPT. But I actually brought the other side of the coin, which is a case. It's very interesting because it's problems on both sides. On the side of plagiarisms, like you just said in Hollywood, and the fact that AI and generative AI is changing different concepts of our reality and is impacting our reality. This is a painting made by an artist that used AI in order to produce it. This painting won a prize. And then there was a court case where the author is called Jason Allen. The author asked the state of Colorado to have author rights on this piece of art, and the state of Colorado decided that they couldn't give it authorship because it was AI was used too many times on the product. And I think this opens a lot of questions. Should laws change because the world is changing? Should we protect people like the workforce in Hollywood that sees their jobs being taken away by these tools? Is an open debate. Another example. Now I have two examples, which I think are very funny. They're facial recognition and how laws impact this. In Italy, our minister Piantedosi wanted to bring in facial recognition. We don't have it in Italy, and the minister wanted to bring it in. And then with the AI Act, they had to take a step back. We cannot have facial recognition in Italy because it's against the AI Act. In the US, where facial recognition is allowed and is heavily used, especially for by police force for detection of
crimes.
Thank you. For detection of crime makers. We see how the model, which is heavily impacted by biases because they used a data set which is called ImageNet, which is trained on faces of a certain colors more than another color. There was a case, a very new case where Portia Waldorf, a woman that was arrested for a crime that she didn't commit because she was wrongly detected by facial recognition tool by the police of Detroit. And I think this is very interesting because we see same exact situation, same exact tool in a country, which is Italy. It cannot be used because there's laws. And in America, it can be used because there's no laws. Why is there no laws in America? This is a very good question. And if somebody has an answer, they can give it to me. They can find me on LinkedIn and give it to me. But what we can say is that in the US, private companies have a lot of power, and they have power when it comes to decision making. And so there is a fight between people that would like to have regulation and people that do not want to have regulation. For example, here I put this picture, which has Sam Altman and a congressman, because last month, in September, 2 US senators announced the first bipartisan framework for AI legislation in the US. And they are bringing now to the Senate, and it has to be voted. But this agreement would represent the first comprehensive legislative plan on enforceable and effective AI protection in the US. But there are companies that are going against it. And what is really funny on the other side is that in the US, we have quite opposite reaction. So they don't want regulation, but then they do stuff like the letter to pose giant AI experiments, which was signed by many important people in the field of AI. And in this letter, instead of saying, let's do AI, but let's do it more cautiously and let's comply to rules, they say, let's stop it because we are going very quickly towards AGI, general artificial intelligence, and we don't know how to tackle it. And so humanity is in danger. Now we are 6 months later. I wanted to show very briefly, and then we are done. I wanted to show very briefly what has changed in 6 months and what has not changed. So for sure, what has changed? The letter increased global attention, because by saying that the world was going to end with AGI and that we wanted to stop, everybody started to talk about AI ethics. And we can see that there are new regulations like the AI Act and like the bipartisan proposition in the US. GPT-5, which was the primary focus of the letter, is composed, it's if OpenAI is telling us the truth. And we can see that also in the higher powers, like the United Nations. We can see some movements in AI ethics because they are establishing a higher level of advising body, which is cool, and we will see what they will do. What has not changed? Well, we didn't reach artificial general intelligence, and the war has not ended. There has a huge debate on laws, but there's very little concrete lawmaking. Like there's a lot of theory and very little practice. Large language models like GPT-4 are still quite not understood. Like we understood more, but not everything. And we still don't have a plan on how to mitigate the long-term risks of AI, and big companies, like we are seeing, they are fighting against the bipartisan act in the US. Big companies still have a lot of power and still have the power to not disclose their research. Now, I thank you for following me and for taking part to this lecture. And I hope it was interesting.
I think it was absolutely interesting. I think I really appreciate especially the first part in which you try to go from the description to the prescription. So this kind of, I would say, approach you follow. I really like. I think everybody, policymaker included, should take this approach. Never try to make a prescription, a law, something without if you don't understand properly what you are actually regulating. And this go in one. Whether if you take a more regulative approach or a more, I would say, relaxed and unregulated approach. So usually this part of the lecture is usually I ask some question, but I think in this case, given the nature of this lecture, I would really like to make 2 points, and then we can have a discussion together. What do you think? So I think you are absolutely right on the importance of regulation, but my fear is that we can have a trend of overregulation that can stop AI research, okay, or can stop the benefit aspect, all the benefit aspects that we can achieve through AI. Is there the possibility for policymakers to distinguish between AI research and AI deployment? Okay, so in my opinion, this is something that has to be really separated. What we want to stop is the deployment, the malicious deployment, and so of AI tool, like for example, as you said, facial recognition. The example that you said is a great example on that. So, do you think that we can take this kind of approach for AI, or do you think there is not possible to make this distinction?
I think these are all very good points, and I think they find a place in the debate. I'm thinking like several important people in the field of AI that said exactly what you just said, and I kind of agree on certain parts. For example, I think that at least conceptually, to separate deployment from research should be important. And I do think that the collision of the two, the conversion of the two, kind of comes with our type of market, which is a capitalistic market. Because to make research, like take, for example, research in university. A lot of universities research on AI. Nevertheless, they have like 1% of the money that private company
Sure.
have, right? And so private companies are always ahead of the curve, and private companies then do not share what they are researching on because they have to be competitive one with the other. So I think in an ideal world, it would be really nice to divide the research from development. But I think that with the economical model that we have, it's
not something easy.
It's not feasible because then a company like I'm sorry, like OpenAI must think that I have something against them.
We have nothing against OpenAI here.
We have nothing against OpenAI, but it's really so easy to make examples on OpenAI for how OpenAI was born and how OpenAI was conceived. The only way that they had to make money, to make more research, was to make the products available to the population, right? And so then that is how deployment and research kind of collided together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think that I agree, ideally, but I do think that when it comes to policy making, people like the policymakers have to find a balance. For example, keeping Italy, for example, competitive in the AI market while protecting Italians.
So, in my opinion, one path that can be achieved, always trying to use this kind of paradigm of the distinction between, I would say, research and application. This is something personally I envision as a possible path to follow, and this is a kind of way of not following the path of overregulation. In my opinion, one path could be, and maybe you can confirm if it has been done already, is standardization. So I can envision a kind of third entities, can be companies, can be public organization, that they try make some AI standardization certificates. So let's make a practical example. If I have an AI whose only use is to distinguish cat and dogs, and I have to run in an application, well, I mean, of course, there would be some concern about how cat and dogs are discerned. Do we have to consider all the possible cats or dogs? Is it fair? But it's different from an AI that is running on a medical device, or an AI that is doing facial recognition. So what I would say, I would envision a kind of structure or organization that release the certificate, and of course, the policymaker in this case can say, okay, do you want me, company that produced the AI designer, do you want to use your AI in my systems? Okay, you have to follow conditions that are stricter as the more delicate and more I would say important is the field that in which they are applied. So in this way, in my opinion, this could be a really good way of regulation. So without stopping research, I can give you an example, practical. There are many good research done, for example, in atrial fibrillation detection. Well, most of these research use like kind of deep black box model that are unexplainable, for example. So, do you want to use your model that do atrial fibrillation detection? Your model has to be explainable. So explainability is one characteristics. Of course, we can introduce metrics such as bias, fairness, and so on. But yeah, I think this could be a possible way practical possible way to tackle this. I don't know if you have some vision on that or some opinion.
Great. And I think that is the kind of direction that we are taking, at least in Europe. I think the idea is to have I'm going to call it an entity, but without making it something so big, like an organization, an entity, a corp that is kind of independent from all the constraints that they have, even if I can see very easily how it would be lobbied quite quickly. But having that and having a standardization of how AI should be in order to be used, I think, I hope, and I think that is the direction where we're going. I think what is the step that we have to take as a international community? Because like so far we talked about different states and independent states, like Europe or the UK when you mentioned UK's regulation, but I think the example that I provided before of Italy having to block
Sure.
AI services, like we are in a world that is hyper-connected and AI tools are used everywhere by everybody, and there are so many more problems when it comes to the internationality of AI. And unfortunately, I think that globally it's going to be very difficult to arrive to that
control level.
To that level that you were explaining of like having an organ that is more powerful than all the other.
I don't think we just need a unique organ, you know. It's mostly, it could be even decentralized organs, multiple one, and, you know, and they can be accredited by government, you got the point. It's just like certification organs. There is, like for medical, like FDA is an example, but we have many of them.
It's just that what we have to consider. Like given that I agree.
Yeah.
That I hope that this is gonna happen. As a person that is also aware of how the world works, I think that AI is an asset of power. There is such an imbalance in how we use data. The representation of the global population in the data that are used in the large language models is basically all westernized.
Yeah.
And the models like perform better on like in certain languages in comparison to others. So I think that in order to arrive to a patent or an organ or whatever it is that kind of establishes a level is going to take a very, very long time, and it's going to take a lot of work, not only in the AI field, but also in the political field in general. And but yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I totally understand your points, and I think is an open debate, and if anyone has suggestion, I think it well accepted. I would say suggestion. I would say solution probably. You know. Okay, so Sophia, thanks again for all the work done. I think it was an incredibly interesting presentation. I really hope, I'm pretty sure that, you know, a lot of people will enjoy that, even just for the point that it's not pure technical, so it's more easy to follow and can be really open to a really wide audience, especially because you have done also this introductory part that explains a bit better what is an AI and what is especially generative AI. That said, thank you very much, and I hope to see you maybe in the next year. You can update us on what are the new changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.